freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave.
Hello, I'm Minister Jason Turner, and this is a New Hope Baptist Church educational series titled Black Heroes of Faith in American History, where we take a look at some of the most influential Black leaders in American history during this month of February, in which we have set aside as Black History Month. Each week, we will take a look at 3 heroic men and women from the past that have endured hardship, oppression, physical abuse, and even death at the hands of those whose very mission it was to break the spirit of every Black man, woman, and child and force them to succumb to a system of bigoted control over anyone who did not look like them. So join us each week as we highlight these heroes who, through God's help and incredible faith, have paved the way for a better future for Black Americans and other oppressed people of color in this nation and abroad. The first person on our list, and whose likeness is represented on our church's beautiful collection of Black heroes through stained glass, is Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was a wonderful woman, and as a protest against the oppressive laws in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat to a white person, which was the law at the time. The bus driver calls the police, and Rosa is arrested. Now, this ignites the fire of a more radical civil rights movement, and Rosa and Martin Luther King Jr. lead the way for Black equity in the South. And it all starts a whirlwind of civil rights action throughout the South and in the entire U.S. Martin stages a citywide bus boycott with every Black person in Montgomery, and the bus companies lose a whole lot of money. And more importantly, the laws were changed, and Black people can now sit wherever they like on the bus. Our next hero depicted in stained glass is Mahalia Jackson. Mahalia Jackson started singing as a child at the Mount Moriah Baptist Church in New Orleans and went on to become one of the most revered gospel figures in the United States. Her recording of Move On Up a Little Higher was a major hit, and she subsequently became an international star for music lovers from a variety of backgrounds. She worked with artists like Duke Ellington and Thomas A. Dorsey, and also sang at the 1963 March on Washington at the request of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Born Mahalia Jackson on October 26, 1911, in New Orleans, Louisiana, to Charity Clark and Johnny Jackson, she became one of gospel music's all-time greats, known for her rich, powerful voice that cultivated a global following. Jackson grew up in a Pitt Street shack and started singing at 4 years old at the Mount Moriah Baptist Church. When she started to sing professionally, she added an I to her first name, making it Mahalia. Brought up in a devout Christian family, Jackson still found herself influenced by the secular sounds of blues artists like Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey. Jackson's sanctified style of performance would also rely upon her freer movement and rhythm when she, and was in contrast to the style seen in more conservative congregations. While she made some recordings in the 1930s, Jackson tasted major success with Move On Up a Little Higher in 1947. which sold millions of copies and became the single most highest selling gospel single in history. She became more in demand, making radio and television appearances and going on tour, eventually performing in Carnegie Hall on October 4th, 1950, to a racially integrated audience. Jackson also had a success in 1952 when she toured abroad in Europe, and she was especially popular in France and in Norway. She had her own gospel program on the CBS television network in 1954 and scored a pop hit with Rusty Old Halo in 1966. She published her autobiography, Moving On Up, after Martin Luther King's death in 1968. Jackson sang at his funeral. Mahalia Jackson died in 1972 and left behind a legacy of unforgettable music that will be with us forever. The last person on our list, but certainly not by any means the least, was a man of wisdom and a man who endured slavery and white oppression and finally escaped and became one of the most prominent black men in all of American history. His name was Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was an escaped slave who became a prominent activist, author, and public speaker. He became a leader in the abolitionist movement, which sought to end the practice of slavery before and during the Civil War. After the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation of 1862, he continued to push for equality and human rights until his death in 1895. Douglass's 1845 autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, described his time as an enslaved worker in Maryland. It was one of 5 autobiographies he penned, along with dozens of noteworthy speeches, despite receiving minimal formal education. An advocate for women's rights, and specifically the right of women to vote, Douglass's legacy as an author and a leader lives on. His work served as an inspiration to the civil rights movement of the 1960s and beyond. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you all next week as we continue to celebrate the legacy of 3 more Black heroes of faith in American history. Thank you, and God bless.